Good evening. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we're going to stick with Vachagotta for a little while. This one is it seems to have happened before the one that we were looking at yesterday. So remember that he worked out all this business of the 10 big questions of the day, maybe, as to whether the universe was infinite and eternal or not, and whether the soul was the same as the body or something different. And of course, this quadrilemma for the Buddha, where his answer is such that he cannot, there's no words, there's no way he can describe what it means to be the Tathagata. And I don't think I actually define that word. It means to go there or to go beyond, or sometimes it's translated as the transcendent one. So there's no way that that can be described. And if it would have been described to Vachagotta, then he would have had this concept about it. So the Buddha just left him hanging in the air there. But the simile of the fire, of course, sort of made it for him, and then he took refuge. He took refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So now this is an earlier episode, and it's called to Vachagotta on the threefold true knowledge. And so on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Vaisali in the great wood in the hall of the peaked roof. So presumably this was not regular, a hall with, say, 4 sides that peaked on top. Whenever they mention something like that, one presumes it was irregular or it was special. Now, on that occasion, the wanderer Vachagotta was staying at the Wanderer's Park of the single white lotus mango tree. Isn't that lovely? The Wanderer's Park of the single white lotus mango tree. And then when it was morning, the Blessed One, dressed, taking his bowl and outer robe, went to Vaisali for alms. Then he thought to himself, it's still too early to wander for alms at Vaisali. Supposing I went to the wanderer, the Samana, Vachagotta, in the Wanderer's Park of the single white lotus mango tree. Then the Blessed One went to the wanderer, and when the wanderer saw him, when Vachagotta saw him, he said, let the Blessed One come. Welcome to the Blessed One. Let the Blessed One be seated. This seat is ready. And so the Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready, and the wanderer Vachagotta took a low seat, sat at one side, and said this to the Blessed One. Venerable Sir, I've heard this. The recluse, Gautama, claims to be omniscient and all-seeing, to have complete knowledge and vision thus. Whether I'm walking or standing, sleeping or awake, knowledge and vision are continuously and uninterruptedly present in me. Venerable Sir, do those who speak thus say what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent him with what is contrary to fact? Do they explain in accordance with the Dharma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from their assertion? Well, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Basically, can they find something wrong with that assertion, with that way of describing the Buddha? And the Buddha replies, those who say thus do not say what has been said by me, but misrepresent me. Venerable Sir, how should I answer that I may say what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent him? How may I explain in accordance with the Dharma? Vacha, if you answer like this, The recluse Gautama has threefold true knowledge. You will be saying what has been said by me and will not misrepresent me with the contrary fact. You will explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from your assertion. But insofar as I wish, this is the first knowledge. So insofar as I wish, I recollect my manifold past lives. Now, he goes into that in more detail. Well, he goes into detail here, but I have to go to another discourse. And basically what he says is that now with his concentrated mind, this is on the straight after the full liberation, just before the full liberation. He gets rid of imperfection. His mind is unblemished, malleable, wieldy, and he recollects his manifold past lives, 50, 100,000, through world contraction, many eons of world. And then that he was so aimed, he was such of a clan, he had this appearance, this sort of nutriment. This was the experience of pleasure and pain, such was my life term. So at some point in that process of liberation, he saw all his past lives, and that the single reason for moving from one life to another was his moral decisions, his ethical actions. So this is really core of his teachings. So that's what we can say of the Buddha, that he knew all his past lives. And insofar as I wish, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior, superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and I understand how beings pass in according to their actions. So in the same way, he's able to see that this is also true for all other beings. So what had been a personal law now becomes a universal law of karma, moral action. And then he says, by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, here and now enter upon and abide in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. So both his heart is purified and his wisdom is now at its most complete. He has come to the destruction of taints. So if you remember the old taints, the oozings, the oozings that we went into with some detail at the beginning, and he knows his heart's completely pure. So these are his three knowledges. This is what he can say. He knows his own personal, all his past lives, and how he arrived here through his moral and ethical actions, and how other beings, which the same is true of all other beings, and that of himself, he is completely free of any defilements. So the recluse Gautama, so if you answer thus, the recluse Gautama has threefold true knowledge, you will be saying what has been said by me and not misrepresent me. So that clears that section about what he knows and what he doesn't know. Now, the interesting thing is that in the tradition, it came to be understood that if the Buddha wanted to know something, then he could bring it to his mind. And in that sense, he was thought to be omniscient. But I don't think we need to have him being much more than a human being for us to see him as our exemplar. He doesn't have to be super duper human. In time, I think there are times in the scriptures where that might be stated. But as we know, with any leader, they're blown up out of proportion to what they were, because everybody wants them to be super duper humans. Yeah. But this is without doubt what he says right from the beginning, right in every source about his telling us about his process. There's always these three knowledges. So now we move on to a different subject. Is there any householder who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership, on the dissolution of the body has made an end to suffering. In other words, been fully liberated. Vacha, says the Buddha, there is no householder who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body, has made an end to suffering. Now, the word householdership really refers to all of us who are still dependent on the sensual life for our happiness, right? And then he says, is there any householder who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body, has gone to heaven? Vacha, there are not only 100 or 200 or 300 or 500, there are far more householders who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of body, have gone to heaven. Now, what that means is that their moral lives were good, and therefore on rebirth, they end up in a beautiful place. Now, this is also true of it right here and now. When we act from ethical points of view, so even though we might have still great attachments, still little, indulgences, but the fact is that we don't do the big stuff. We don't kill people. We don't steal, lots of stuff. And we're constantly making an effort to purify our hearts. Then we are at times in heaven when we're happy, right? And the whole idea is that as we go through life, we find ourselves just being generally more content. Now, of course, there are deeper happinesses, the sense of meaningfulness about our lives, so that even when we're going through a really rough patch, even when unfortunate things happen to us, we find this seat of meaningfulness, which gives us purpose and a deeper sense of happiness, worthiness in our lives. So the whole business of happiness is a bit complex. So there we have a basic statement. Unless we're prepared to abandon the sensual life, remember that's not the same as being self-mortifying. It's just letting go of our attachments. In other words, letting go of those things upon which we become dependent for our happiness. Yeah. And we won't be liberated, and final liberation. And but we may get to a very happy, nice place after birth, and even in this very life. Now a point is made. Master Gautama, is there any Ajivika who, on dissolution of the body, has made an end to suffering? So the scriptures always, the Buddha always has it in for two types of people. The Brahmins, with their sense of superiority, born from the mouth of Brahma, and their dependence on ritual, which he saw no purpose to, and also just their general conceit about themselves being superior to everybody else. So he always has a go at the old Brahmins. Now the other ones are the Ajivikas. The Ajivikas are the ascetic types, the one who've left the holy life, who are, as he did, dressed in rag robes, etc., living a very frugal life, just on alms round, just like the Buddhist monks. The Buddhist monks just like them in many ways, but they don't believe in karma. They don't believe in moral efficacy, as it's called. In other words, the consequence of moral and immoral actions. So the Buddha says, so again, the question is there any Ajivika who, on dissolution of the body, has made an end to suffering? Vacha, there is no Ajivika who, on the dissolution of the body, has made an end to suffering. So that's the end of that. Master Gautama, is there any Ajivika who, on dissolution of the body, has gone to heaven? So, this is about good actions. When I recollect the past 91 eons, Vacha, I do not recall any Ajivika who, on the dissolution of the body, went to heaven, with one exception, and he held the doctrine of moral efficacy of action, the doctrine of moral efficacy of deeds. In other words, the only Ajivika who ever got to heaven was the one who understood that moral actions, ethical actions, have their consequence. So He doesn't have much say for the Ajivikas, the poor fellows. I mean, most were men, but there were women who went out with them. Usually, they said with their husbands. That being so, Master Gautama, this fold of sectarians is empty, even of going to heaven. In other words, I mean, Vachagotta is himself an Ajivaka. He's part of that group. He's not yet joined the Buddha. So he says, you know, even like all of us are not even going to get to heaven. That being so, Vacha, this fold of sectarians is empty of even going to heaven. And that is what the Blessed One said. And the wanderer, the Samana Vachagotta, was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. I'm not so sure he'd be all that delighted, frankly. So there we have it. So this particular one was really getting it straight what the Buddha knows, what he knows by his direct experience about all his past lives. He sees that people are moving from one life to another according to their moral actions, and he knows himself to be free of all defilements, purified. And those that last one, of course, is true of any arahat. Anybody who makes it to complete liberation must be free of all defilements. And then we have this question about whether people who are householders, which is just another way of saying anybody attached to the sensual life in any way, they're obviously not going to make the end of suffering yet, but they're on the way, huh? And but they might make heaven. But the poor old Ajivikas, the old self-mortifiers, and the ones who don't believe that there are consequences to moral actions, well, no hope for them at all. They don't even get to heaven. So with that in mind, we can, of course, continue our practice, since we've understood the moral efficacy of our actions. So I can only hope that you will continue with your practice and be liberated from all suffering. And if not, at least get into heaven sooner. Well, no, not sooner. I don't need to go there too soon. Anyway, I do hope that you will be liberated sooner rather than later, so we can begin our practice.